Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. While the D.C. press corps is working earnestly to unburden Kamala from what she has been, we need to focus on some of the things she has said and the things that she has done when she was a proud card-carrying new Bolshevik. One of the more chilling statements she's made, this is right up there with Tim Walz's statement on freedom of speech, which is something that has limitations in Tim Walz's world that were not contemplated by the founders or the Supreme Court, for that matter. But anyway, he's free speech for people who agree with me kind of guy, Tim Walz is. Kamala Harris once waxing philosophic, off script, danger zone for Kamala, waxing philosophic about her prosecutorial power when she was one in California.
You know, the power I have as a prosecutor is that with a swipe of my pen, I can charge someone with a misdemeanor, the lowest level offense possible. And by virtue of that swipe of my pen, you will have to go to a courthouse and stand in line. You will have to come out of pocket and hire an attorney. You may get arrested for a few hours. You will be embarrassed in your community. You will miss time from coming onto the Google campus, all because with the swipe of my pen, I've charged you with a crime, which I may choose to dismiss 2 weeks later. It's an incredible amount of power.
It really is.
She enjoys every second of it.
I think the way it comes across to me is she enjoys using it capriciously. Andy McCarthy is a former chief assistant U.S. attorney, Southern District of New York, contributing editor at National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks for joining us. Is that the kind of thing you guys would say, the old Southern District of New York, sitting around the water cooler, just marveling in your own power and the ability to use it arbitrarily?
Well, good morning, guys. She said things that I thought were a lot crazier, and let me just try to explain why. When you are a young prosecutor, they do stress to you that, at least in well-run offices, I was, as you said, I was in the Southern District of New York, which was a federal office. I don't think she was ever a federal prosecutor. I think she's always a state prosecutor in California. Mm-hmm. But responsible prosecutors make that pitch to you, but the important thing here is that you're told to, imagine yourself on the receiving end of some of the things that prosecutors can do. And the reason the lesson is drummed into you is to try to make clear that you can ruin an innocent person's life if you don't do your job carefully and responsibly, because it is an enormous amount of power. And as we've seen, I think, again and again over the lawfare campaign, it's not just a matter of, they prosecute you and maybe you're guilty of a crime. The process itself is the penalty in a lot of ways. It's very expensive. It's humiliating. It induces a lot of anxiety. And in a good prosecutor's office, they basically remind you all the time that not just that you have an enormous amount of power, but to think about what it would be like to have that power inflicted on you and what you would expect in the way of it's being used in a responsible way before action was taken against you. And I think you're right to point out that there's two ways of taking the message that she just, in that clip that you just played. One is, if you have the wrong kind of person, that's a very intoxicating thing to say, look at how much power you have. The right way to do that is to say, this is an enormous amount of power in what's supposed to be a free society where people are presumed innocent. And the only way that you can responsibly exercise it is to imagine what you would expect before it was inflicted on you. And that's not what I'm taking from her.
No, I think
from her articulation of it.
No, I think the blood dripping from her fangs when she was offering that statement was a bit of a tell. This is very much like what we hear and what we've seen in New York with, for example, Tish James campaigning on getting Trump.
Right.
These are not prosecutors that are humbled by the power they have and are thinking about the restraint that calls for and the judiciousness with respect to the use of that power. These are people like, I got all this power and I can do whatever I want to whoever I want, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah, the politicized use of the power is not only abusive, sometimes in a ruinous way, in individual cases. I think, just think about our conversations over the years. The accumulated effect of it is to delegitimize the whole idea of the rule of law and the idea that our criminal justice system produces legitimate outcomes. And I think whenever I think about that, I think people are playing with fire, because if you don't have that system, you can't have the rule of law. And if you can't have the rule of law, you really can't have a flourishing society. You're a lot closer to the law of the jungle. And I just, all of this over the years, taking the powers that are reposed in the Justice Department, taking the powers that these elected district attorneys have and using them in a political way is ruinous in a way that I think the people who are doing it don't appreciate.
Well, right. And staying in New York for a minute, we still have a September 18th sentencing date that's sort of been lost in all the tumult of the last several weeks. But Trump is going to be sentenced in Manhattan on September 18th, barring something unexpected, which who knows?
Well, who knows?
Who knows
in
with
this
that?
day and age.
Yeah. But anyway, his appeal based on the Supreme Court's presidential immunity decision was rejected, as we anticipated and we spoke with you about. Given the political landscape, obviously the judge in that case is very attentive to the political landscape now, and is we're coming up on that date, and this will be a little over a week after the first debate, ostensibly the first debate, unless she agrees to the September 4th one. What do you anticipate with respect to that hearing? Anything different are you thinking about it in any different way than you were a few weeks ago?
No, I've been writing about this the last couple of days to try to focus people on the fact that the sentencing is going to happen 2 days after early voting begins in Pennsylvania, and I think only a couple of days before it begins in a few other states that may be consequential in the election. So here's the current scheme of things. Trump, after the Supreme Court decided the immunity case, made some post-trial motions. One was to have the guilty verdicts thrown out on the basis of the immunity ruling. And his reason for doing that is that the Supreme Court said in the immunity ruling that presidents have immunity from their official acts, such that not only can you not charge an official act as a crime, like if the president orders, famously they kept saying he orders a political assassination, that act can't be charged as murder, as a crime in and of itself. What the court also said was that immunized acts can't be used as evidence in a chain of proof to prove another crime that's supposedly based on private activity, right? So the thing is, it's not just that you can't charge it as a crime in and of itself. You can't even use it as evidence to prove other crimes. And that should be a big problem for Bragg's case in Manhattan, because he clearly used evidence of Trump's official acts. He even called two of his White House staffers as witnesses. And they can't really say that evidence was unimportant, because when the prosecutors summed up to the jury, they said it was devastating evidence. So I don't see how you can say that it was like de minimis or not prejudicial, et cetera. So Trump moved to have the case thrown out, or the verdicts thrown out, on that basis. And he also yet again asked for Judge Merchan to recuse himself. And I don't mean to suggest by saying that I don't think, the way I said that, I don't mean to suggest that I don't think Merchon should be recused. I think a good judge wouldn't have had to be told that. He clearly should not have been the judge on this case. The only reason I sort of roll my eyes a little bit is Trump has made this motion like 3 times already. This judge is not going to recuse himself, right? So yesterday, or I guess probably 2 days ago, Merchon denied the recusal motion, as everybody expected. He says he's going to rule on the immunity by September 16th. I suspect the reason he's doing that so late is he's obviously going to deny the immunity motion, but he wants to do it as late as he can before the sentencing because he doesn't want to give Trump time to appeal. And I think he's going to impose a prison sentence.
Really?
And the reason I think that is because Trump is going to get bail pending appeal. So there's no way he's actually going to be put in prison. And I've always thought the reason for this prosecution, which is a ridiculous case, is to allow the Democrats to say in as powerful a way as they can in the run-up to the election that Trump is a criminal. So I think they'd like to be able to tell the voting public he's a convicted felon who
sentenced to jail time,
facing a prison sentence.
Yeah.
No way. It's not like he has to think he's actually putting Trump in prison. He won't. But they will have the political message for the last 6 weeks, including when people have already started voting. That'll be if people don't think that's going to leave a mark, I think it's going to leave a mark because the only remaining consequential audience in the election are people who are unlike us, who don't follow politics and just tune in, when they vote, and they usually don't tune in till it's time to vote. And for those people, and it may be a diminishing amount of them, but they're out there, it could be a big deal to them that, Trump has been convicted of felony. They're not going to know what a farce this case was. All they're going to know is he was convicted of felonies and he's facing a prison sentence. And they'll be asking all the things that we've talked about for a couple of years, right? Does this mean he can't run for president? Does this mean he'd have to be in jail while he's, they'll be asking all those same things.
Yep. They sure will. And, the other reason he has to impose a prison sentence is because you have to legitimize this farce. You can't go through all this and say, suspended, you pay a fine and do a weekend of picking up trash. You can't do that. What was this all about?
Yeah, not just that, Dan. The formal charges in the case are falsification of business records, but the way that Bragg and his prosecutors portrayed the case to the jury, which the judge allowed them to do, was this was a conspiracy to steal the 2016 presidential election that worked. If that was what this really was, that's the crime of the century. How can you not give a prison sentence for that?
I know, but they could have brought this case 6 years ago, and they waited. It's so obvious what they're doing here. They waited until an election year.
It's obvious to us, but New York is an elected legal system. Even the judges, not Merchon. Merchon's appointed by the Democrats in the system, but a lot of the judges, like Arthur Engoron, who had the civil case, he's an elected judge, right? These are all elected Democrats, and they're not interested in like the machinations they had to go through to get the case to trial as a felony. We care about that stuff, but in New York they don't care about it, and in the media they don't care about it. And the question is, are voters going to care about it? To the extent they pay any attention to it in the last, 6 to 8 weeks before Election Day.
Well, before we let you go, I just wanted to get your comment. We mentioned it in passing earlier in the program, but a couple years ago, over the last few years actually, you got headlines like this from The Intercept. Republican conspiracy theory about a Biden scandal in Ukraine is absolute nonsense. The rumor that Joe Biden abused his power to protect his son's business interests in Ukraine. Total nonsense, leading anti-corruption advocates say. The New York Times reporting this week, Hunter Biden asked the State Department for help securing Burisma project in 2016. There's also prosecutors indicated in court papers last week with respect to Hunter Biden's upcoming trial for tax evasion that they were going to introduce evidence of Hunter Biden's other business dealings, including with a Romanian businessman who was trying to influence government policy during Joe Biden's term as vice president. Absolute nonsense. And, it turned out to be true.
Yeah, well, look, you're playing with the House money when the media is on your side, and these guys know that they're never going to be taken to account for the kind of nonsense that they say. This is why nobody believes anything the media tells them. I think the media probably has a lower approval rating than Congress does these days.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can't take a lot of comfort from that, because I do think people hear things in the media and they think they're probably not true. But you can shoot down a bad media story when they're trying to represent something to you. But what we haven't figured out how to do is, if the media wants to kill a story, they can still do it. And there's not much to be done about it. And for example, and the most powerful example we have in front of us is, if they won't ask Kamala Harris questions, we can all know that she's a blithering idiot, and that to the extent that she has ideas, they're noxious ideas, and they're probably ideas she hasn't thought through in any kind of a critical way. But if nobody asks her questions, then how's anyone going to know that? And at this point, she seems to think she can get through. And I have a sad feeling that she may be right. She thinks she can get through the next 80 days without having to be put through the crucible that candidates are usually put through. And it's one of the most disgraceful things I think we've ever seen out of the media. But
at least since the 2008 campaign, when Obama was anointed by them as having descended from on high to save us.
The second coming.
Yeah, well, look, every time we think they've gone as low as they can go, they defy your expectations.
Well, right. I mean, but the problem, what we don't recognize, it seems to me, I don't know, just my observation is, the media, to your point, media has a lower approval rating than Congress, and I don't believe anything the media says. And then that same person will say, "Hey, did you see what Jim Acosta reported? Hey, did you see what NBC said?" I mean, it's just it's like I totally reject everything they say. You can't believe what I just saw on ABC. Oh, well, which is it?
Yeah,
you don't believe it. You don't believe it, like, intellectually, but in terms of your sort of visceral reptilian response, you're there. They got you, and they know that.
Yeah. Well, and it's not only that, Dan. It's that they're deciding what you talk about, right? You may not believe them, but they're setting the agenda of what you talk about.
Right. Well, this is my point. We were just having this discussion. Yeah. Talk about Jim Acosta, these other CNN, and some of these people, they want to pretend like they're media, and a lot of people will pretend along with them. And so they say, can't you do a press conference? What is her campaign schedule today? Right. So they want us talking about Kamala's appearances with them while they're earnestly working to reintroduce her and detach her from the administration she's a part of. That's what they want us talking about. So why are we talking about that? Rather than talking about the position she's taken on issues, things she's done in her positions that she's been elected to, that run afoul of the supermajority of Americans' views on these issues, and they would be aghast if they knew some of the things she did. But they don't know, because we take our cues and we're saying, why won't she do an interview with Anderson Cooper? Like, that freaking matters. What matters is what she's said and done. What matters is who she is, not who she's interacting with, especially when they're friendlies.
No. What matters is whether J.D. Vance is weird.
Yeah, well,
right?
Yeah, right.
Wasn't that worth taking 2
And
weeks?
is a true hillbilly go to Yale? I mean, that's what Walls is fighting.
But then our response is, we're not weird, you're weird. Well, okay, so now we're having their conversation again.
Right, but that's exactly the point. You're right.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, contributing editor, National Review, the author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Ball of Collusion is the book. Andy, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.